We've also, I should note that the other area of disagreement that we have with the NBN, the other major area, is the question of the structure of the industry. Now, we believe that there should be more competition in the industry, not less. We do not agree that we should be re-establishing a telecommunications monopoly, if you like, a son or daughter of the old Telecom or Postmaster General's Department. We want to see facilities-based competition promoted, not prevented. Now, once again, if you take Korea as an example or an exemplar of what we should be aspiring to, and it's the government that has cited that country so frequently, there the regulator, the Korean Communications Commission, made it abundantly clear to me that a key objective of their telecoms policy was the promotion of facilities-based competition. And there is, for most premises, a number of wireline facilities that are available and competing with each other. And yet, as Paul mentioned, and as you've heard me say on many occasions, we have, with the design of the NBN, a clear policy objective that is entirely at odds with that is focused on creating a fixed line monopoly so that there will be only one fixed line broadband service into Australian residences and small businesses. There will no doubt continue to be some competition for the big end of town, but the big end of town has got competition now, as we know, particularly in the downtown and the CBDs of our major cities. But in the areas where there is inadequate facilities-based competition today, or where there is no facilities-based competition, because there is simply the Telstra network, there will be no more competition. We're going to build a new network, discontinue the copper network, and by contract and statute prevent alternative broadband fixed-line networks competing with the NBN. And when you ask the question, why, what is the reason for that, what is the justification for that, it is simply to protect the economics of the NBN. So it is simply to preserve the revenues of the NBN. Now, there are some of us that are old enough to recall, and you have to be quite old to recall this. Many years ago, when state governments were involved in many areas of business, they had brickworks and printing factories and of course railways, they still have railways in many cases, and all of these businesses, regulations were in place, legislation was in place to make it difficult for the private sector to compete with it. Going back decades, there were battles between state governments and the road transport industry, objecting to regulations that were designed to keep traffic on the state government-owned rail network. In other words, to support the economics of a government monopoly. And that is where we are going back to today. This is turning back the clock decades. So those are fundamentally our criticisms of the NBN. Now, it's not a question of wireless versus fibre, and you see the debate simplified into that. I mean, all of us, I hope, understand, all of you do, but I hope everyone in Australia understands that a robust wireless network, and we have one at the moment and it'll get better and more competitive, will depend on a growing amount of fibre backhaul. There's going to be more and more fibre in the ground and no doubt in the air as well to support that. But the big expense for the NBN, the thing that makes it a $50 billion punt, is rolling that fibre into every residence. And the question is, do you need to do that to achieve fast broadband? Well, if your objective is to deliver a gigabit per second to every household in Australia, you might be able to argue you do. But the proposition that should be the benchmark for fast broadband, or even that 100 megabits per second should be the absolutely guaranteed service for fast broadband, service level for fast broadband, begs the question, and this again I'm just anticipating what Robert will be saying to you later today, what are the applications that are going to require that speed? When I was in Incheon with Cisco demonstrated some of their applications that they are deploying in Korea, and one of them was really remarkably high definition video conferencing. It did take my breath away. The high definition was very impressive. It was running over 1.5 megabits per second symmetrical each way. And I said to the gentleman from Cisco, gosh, that doesn't seem a lot of bandwidth. And he said, oh, well, we're very good, we're better than everyone else. Everyone says that, I guess. Other people would need 6 or 8 megs. So, you ask yourself, what are the applications that are going to require the levels, the degree of bandwidth that fibre to the home will develop? And nobody has an answer to that other than sometimes you get these fantastical examples which involve, a family of 6 with everybody doing high definition video conferencing in separate bedrooms. The examples become unreal. So that really is the issue. Cost effectiveness. What are we trying to achieve? If the objective is fast broadband for all Australians, why are we not employing the mix of technologies that delivers that in the most cost-effective fashion? Why are we overbuilding networks that, with no modification in some cases, with some modification in others, are capable of delivering that service already? Why are we obliging or preventing Telstra, for example, from using its HFC network to offer broadband services? In every other comparable country of which I am aware, HFC networks, which of course were originally rolled out for pay television, are being deployed for the purpose of providing broadband and doing so competitively with fibre. And that is generally being encouraged, strongly encouraged, because it provides that facilities-based competition. Now, the question then arises, and I'll perhaps conclude my remarks here. I don't know whether, Graham, we've got time for some questions, but I'd be happy to entertain some if that was of interest. The question then is, what is to be done? That was a question Lennon proposed, which I suppose is an appropriate question to pose in respect of this massive government-owned monopoly, which I have to say does owe more to Gosplan and V.I. Lennon than it does to Adam Smith. The question is, what would the coalition do? This is what I can guarantee to you. Our commitment is to ensure that all Australians have access to fast broadband. Our commitment is to ensure that so far as possible, that is provided by the private sector in a competitive telecommunications market. Now, we will face some very real challenges achieving that in a cost-effective way, courtesy of the NBN, or courtesy of the NBN legislation. The legislation that has just been passed by the Parliament makes it, and this is quite deliberate, extremely difficult, one would say close to impossible, for the NBN to be sold. Under statute, it cannot be sold until it is complete, till the whole network is complete. That's a date past the lifespan of many of us, I suspect. And only after the Communications Minister and the Finance Minister have certified its right for sale, a certification that can, in effect, be disallowed by either house. So selling the NBN will be harder than privatising Telstra was. Think about that, and we all remember the huge debates over that. So that is a very big challenge. On the other hand, how can one justify continuing to spend tens of billions of dollars more than you need to get the outcome, the policy objective that you want? And this, of course, at the very base basis of this whole debate, the fundament of this debate, is what is so frustrating. Because as a politician, I can understand someone standing up and saying, men and women of Australia, no Australian child shall live in broadband poverty. I can understand a promise like that, with apologies to RJL Hawke, of course. But then people expect governments to deliver on that promise in a cost-effective way, recognising that there are other priorities. Roads, public transport, hospitals, schools, dams, take your pick. It's a very long list. There's no shortage of infrastructure requirements in Australia, no shortage of things for governments to spend money on, and no shortage of taxpayers who'd like to have tax cuts. So there are lots of competing uses for that money. And that opportunity cost is something that has to be borne in mind. So right at the core of this issue is not the objective. We agree on the objective. The question is, how can you achieve it at a lower cost? And if I could just sum up the flaw in the government's approach, the fundamental flaw, is that they have confused the means with the end. It is one thing to be entranced by the benefits of broadband, and I guess to some extent we all are. I certainly am. But it is quite another thing to assume that the only way of delivering that is through a fibre to the home network. There is, the challenge is to find any other country in the world that is doing anything comparable to this, or any comparable country that's doing something comparable to this. I've referred to Korea. We all know what's happening in Europe and in the United States, and even the Singapore model, which is obviously a very different country to Australia, is very different from what we have here. So what the government has done is assume that the means that they have identified has become the end, and that is simply not right. The approach of government should be one that is technologically agnostic, that is focused on getting the promised objective and doing so in a cost-effective way. So in terms of our approach, if elected, we will firstly do what should have been done at the outset and have a rigorous cost-benefit analysis to identify what is the most cost-effective way, given the facts on the ground or in the ground, to delivering fast broadband to all Australians. And I would imagine that will involve a very significant change to the NBN strategy. I would think there would be many areas where you'll see fibre to the node. There'll be no doubt some areas where there will be fibre to at least to the basement, but I don't believe that there will be a fibre to the home network. I just don't think that is likely to be justified economically. But nonetheless, we will ensure that the Productivity Commission does that cost-benefit analysis, and so that everyone can then see the results of it and, no doubt, debate it. As to the structure of the industry, one of the challenges we will face, of course, is legislation, but our goal will be to ensure that there is real competition and that we support the structural separation of Telstra's customer access network. I know there are different views on that, but I've had the view that that should have occurred a very long time ago, but that's another debate. We support that, but we do not believe that there should be any inhibitions on facilities-based competition. So if somebody wants to roll out a fibre ring to service a densely settled residential area, then let them do so. Why not? Why not allow that to occur? Why would you prevent that from occurring? Surely that is something that should be promoted. Insofar as it's possible, we would endeavour to liberate the HFC networks so they were able to compete and go back to providing broadband services if in fact that part of the bargain has been executed. It is not going to be easy. The government is, by legislation and by contract with Telstra, creating a very complex Gordian knot of contract and legislation and regulation, which will be very hard to unpick. But that's going to be a question of the means and practicality. Our objectives are very clear. fast broadband for all Australians at an affordable price, plainly, a competitive industry where there is real competition facilitated and never obstructed at every level, retail, the retail services level and the facilities level. So that's going to be our objective. A lot will depend, of course, of obviously if and in particular when there is a change of government. But I hope that we'll be able to work with all of you in the months and years ahead to come to the best outcome so that we can get this vitally important industry on track to deliver the services, the utility services, the essential services that Paul spoke so poetically about earlier to all Australians, but to do so in a way that promotes the competition, that doesn't stifle competition, that promotes the competition that we know is going to be the driver of excellence, better services and innovation. Thank you very much.